You need to leave. Sir, first class isn't for people who look like you. That was the first thing flight attendant Emily Ward said. Not a greeting, not a request for a boarding pass. Just that. Loud enough for nearby passengers to turn. Cold enough to freeze a 16-year-old girl in her seat. Blunt enough to slap every ounce of dignity from the black man sitting in 1A. She didn't whisper. She didn't lower her voice. She didn't care. What she saw was a hoodie, dark skin, and a threat to her idea of status. What she didn't see was the truth, that the man she just targeted, Jalen Carter, owned the very airline she worked for, and in just 15 minutes, she and half her team would be gone. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was humiliation, delivered publicly, in front of a child. Before we dive into this story, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And if stories like this move you, even just a little, hit like and subscribe to the channel for more powerful moments like this. Now, let's begin. It started like any ordinary boarding. Jalen Carter, 44, quietly stepped into the SkyPulse Airlines cabin for flight SP-202 from Chicago to Maui, dressed in a soft gray hoodie, dark jeans, and sneakers. Beside him, his daughter Maya, 16, carried a small backpack, flipping through a folded travel guide with drawings she'd made for the trip. They had just 3 days together, Jalen's only break in months, first class, seats 1A and 1B, reserved, verified, paid for in full, by the airline's sole owner, but none of that mattered the moment Emily saw them. She walked straight over with a clipboard and suspicion in her eyes. "Boarding pass?" she asked without warmth. Jalen handed it to her. She stared, then blinked. "This doesn't look right," she muttered. "We've had fraud attempts before." Jalen's eyebrows raised, but his tone stayed level. "It's legitimate. You can scan it." Before she could respond, Lucas Grant, tall, neat, smug, came up beside her. He gave Jalen a slow once-over, chuckled lightly, and said, "You don't look like first class." It wasn't a joke. It wasn't even subtle. Olivia Bennett hovered behind them, arms crossed, saying nothing, her silence granting permission for what followed. Jalen exhaled through his nose. "My daughter and I are seated here. Please confirm it with your scanner." Emily didn't move. Instead, she turned slightly and whispered something to Lucas. Lucas gave a small nod and walked off. "Sir," she said, "we're going to have to ask you to move to economy until this can be resolved. Please don't make this harder." Maya looked up, alarmed. "Dad?" she whispered. "What's going on?" Jalen didn't answer her yet. From the second row, a white couple, the Thompsons, were offered champagne by Lucas, who smiled warmly and told them to "let us know if you need anything." The contrast was brutal. Maya whispered again. "Why are they treating us like this?" Jalen's voice was calm but clipped. "Because some people look at clothes and skin instead of character." Emily raised her voice again. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave this section," Olivia chimed in. "Please don't cause a disruption." The word disruption carried weight, a threat in corporate speak. And then came Noah Reed, security officer, heavy boots and all. He looked at Jalen, then at Maya, then back at Jalen. "We've had some complaints. Do you have ID to prove this is your seat?" he asked. "Not boarding pass, not reservation, ID." Jalen slowly pulled out his pass again, handed it to him. Noah barely looked. "Sir, either cooperate or we'll have to escort you off." Maya's hand clenched around her father's. "They're going to kick us off?" she asked. "For sitting down?" In row 3, Sophia Lee, a first-class passenger, began filming. She angled her phone from her tray and whispered, "Unbelievable. This is real." Her post hit X within seconds. "Black father and daughter being harassed for flying first class, Sky Pulse, do better. A row behind. Michael Chen caught on and quietly pressed record, too. His post went up. Crew accusing man of fraud. He's just sitting. This is wrong. The cabin was watching now, but so was the internet. Ava Kim, a trainee flight attendant near the galley, watched in disbelief. His boarding pass looks fine, she murmured. Emily turned sharply. You're new. Stay out of this. But Ava didn't move. She kept watching, observing, recording, quietly pressing a button on her voice recorder. Jalen leaned toward his daughter. Maya, this happens more than you think. But it's not right, she whispered, her voice trembling. You've helped so many people. You don't deserve this. Jalen smiled softly, pain behind his eyes. That's why we record. Not for today, for tomorrow. Then he tapped the screen on his own phone. Recording began. Emily stepped forward again. Economy is ready. We can take you there now, Noah added. You're delaying the flight. Jalen didn't budge. No, this is my seat. It's on record. At that moment, Lucas walked briskly past, scribbling something into his logbook, unseen by most. He wrote, Passenger 1A, unable to verify ticket, moved by security, a forgery, a cover. Maya saw it. Dad, she whispered, he just lied about us. Jalen's jaw clenched. I saw, in the galley. Michael heard Emily laugh. He thinks that hoodie makes him invisible. VIPs don't dress like that. He nearly stood up. Instead, he hit post. Just overheard crew mocking this guy. This is next level ugly. Emily came back with force. Sir, if you refuse to move, you'll be labeled non-compliant. You'll regret this, Jalen said quietly. Mark my words. Ava stepped forward. He's not doing anything wrong, she said, her voice trembling but firm. Sophia called out from row 3. This is on video. Millions will see this. Lucas muttered as he passed. You should have stayed in coach. Maya squeezed her father's hand. I'm scared. Jalen looked into her eyes. Stay with me, okay? We're not alone anymore. And they weren't. Not with the cameras rolling. Not with the lies already posted. Not with the truth quietly building like a wave. 15 minutes from now, that wave would crash. The cabin air thickened as if pressurized by something beyond altitude, something heavier than gravity. Emily Ward wasn't done. Leave seat 1A or face removal, she hissed, voice sharper now, as though Jalen's refusal to submit bruised her pride. She wasn't asking anymore. She was commanding. Lucas stood beside her, arms folded, smirking like a man who thought he'd already won. You don't belong here. Read the policy, he added smugly, as if corporate language could erase human dignity. Olivia, still silent but complicit, finally chimed in, We prioritize real passengers, not trouble. The word real struck like a slap. Jalen inhaled once, slow and deep, not to calm himself, but to hold back the explosion. Across the aisle, Noah Reed stepped forward, the security officer's stance suddenly more aggressive, hand grazing his radio. Don't make this hard, Mr. Carter, he said, deliberately using his name now, though the tone dripped with disdain. We'll remove you if necessary. Consider this your final warning. Maya's fingers were cold in Jalen's palm. Dad, she whispered. They're lying. They're making it up. Jalen nodded slowly. I know. And we're catching every second. His phone kept recording silently on his tray. This isn't the first time, Maya, but it might be the last. Ava Kim, the trainee, stepped forward again, barely able to hide the tremble in her voice. His ticket is valid, she said. You saw it, Olivia snapped. Stay in your role. Ava, you're here to learn, not interfere. But Ava stood her ground. I am learning. I'm learning that you're wrong. Her voice cracked at the end, but the damage was done. Emily turned red. Meanwhile, Michael Chen rose slightly from his seat. "I've seen enough," he said aloud, camera still rolling. "This is harassment, and it's online." From the corner of the cabin, he uploaded the footage to TikTok with a caption that stung. "Sky Pulse crew escalating without cause. Man targeted for looking wrong. Unacceptable." Lucas turned toward him and growled, "Sir, sit down before you're included in the report." Michael didn't budge. "Go ahead. I want to be in it." His voice was firm. The tension in the cabin shifted. The passengers were no longer watching. They were choosing sides, and the crew could feel it. Maya looked around, confused but aware. "Why do they hate us?" she asked quietly. "What did we do?" Jalen turned to her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Nothing. That's the point. Sometimes people hate the idea of us before they even know who we are." Maya's eyes welled up. "But you always said we stand tall." Jalen nodded. "And that's what we're doing." The noise of the aircraft became background static. A memory flashed across Jalen's mind. He was 22, standing in a luxury hotel lobby, wearing a hoodie and jeans. The front desk clerk looking him up and down before saying, "Sir, guests enter from the side entrance." He remembered the burn of that moment, the quiet rage, the humiliation in front of colleagues, the resolve that followed. That night, he promised himself, "One day, I'll buy what they say I can't touch." And now, he owned the airline. And yet, here it was, again. He tapped his phone and called Nora. "We're escalating," he said softly. "Upload my recording. Send it to Elena." On the other end, Nora replied without missing a beat. "Understood. I'm logging it now. Systems active." Ava inched closer, her voice low. "I recorded the audio, just in case they delete the logs." Jalen met her eyes. "You're brave." Ava swallowed hard. "Someone has to be—" Then Olivia stepped in front of Ava, blocking her. "Back to the galley! Trainee!" But Ava didn't move. She stood frozen, not in fear, but in resolve. Sophia called out from behind. "Why is she being silenced now? She's the only one telling the truth." Lucas clenched his teeth. "Enough!" he barked. "This passenger is being disruptive." Jalen rose slightly in his seat. "No, I'm being disrespected, threatened, lied about, and recorded doing nothing but sitting next to my daughter." Emily, frustrated, turned to Noah. "He needs to go. Now." Noah nodded and took a step forward, but just as he reached out, Jalen spoke, his voice calm but loaded with heat. "Touch me, and this becomes a legal matter. Right now, it's just corporate." Noah hesitated. That was the first real crack. Michael stood fully now. "He's done nothing wrong. I've got it all on tape," Emily barked. "Sit down or I'll call the captain." Michael held his ground. "Do it." He posted again, crew threatening to remove man for sitting quietly, passenger support growing. The tide was turning. Then Ava spoke again. "Emily and Olivia have ignored 2 other passenger complaints before this, about profiling. I overheard them brag about it last week." Olivia turned, stunned. "That's a lie." Ava's voice grew stronger. "No, it's the truth. You laughed about rerouting passengers based on how they looked." Gasps echoed across the cabin. Jalen remained seated, but his presence had grown 10 times its size. "You built a lie," he said, looking at each of them. "And now you're standing on it, hoping it holds," Sophia added. "Too late. We're all watching it collapse." Emily looked rattled. "We're following protocol," she insisted. "No," Jalen replied. "You're following your bias." At that moment, Lucas picked up the forged logbook and scribbled a second entry, this time writing, "Passenger 1A non-compliant, security required." Michael noticed. "He's altering records." he shouted. I saw it! Another passenger grabbed their phone and began filming too. The moment had become unstoppable. Jalen turned to Maya. Stay strong. It's almost over, Maya asked. What are you going to do? He looked at her, then at the crew. What they never saw coming. Then he turned forward and said, not loudly, but with finality, Their time is up, Sophia shouted from behind. We stand with you. Michael nodded. You're not alone. The cabin was no longer silent. It was alive. A current of anger, truth, and support surged from row to row. Passengers murmured, shifted, bristled. Emily stepped back for the first time. Lucas looked uncertain. Olivia's arms dropped to her sides. Noah stopped moving. Jalen pressed one last button on his phone. Nora, he said, confirm recordings and prep for termination. On the other end, she answered, confirmed. Elena is on standby. Your authority is clear. Ava exhaled shakily. What happens now? Jalen looked toward the front of the plane. Now, he said, now I show them who they tried to remove. The cabin, still in the sky but no longer still, waited, because something irreversible had begun. No one spoke, but everyone was listening. The cabin of Flight SP-202 felt like it had stalled mid-air, though the wheels hadn't even left the ground. Then Emily Ward did something that changed everything. She reached for the intercom, her hands trembling just enough to betray the confidence in her voice. Click. Attention passengers, she said, her words slow and stiff, as if rehearsed but unraveling. Due to a disruptive passenger in seat 1A, we are currently working with security to resolve the situation. We appreciate your patience. A low murmur swept through the cabin like a cold gust. Sophia Lee nearly dropped her phone. She just lied. On the intercom, she said aloud, her voice rising. He hasn't even moved. Jalen didn't flinch. He just sat there, back straight, fingers lightly pressed against the armrest. Maya looked up at him, her voice low but clear. She's scared. Dad. Jalen nodded. She should be. Across the aisle, Lucas Grant smirked as if he believed that announcement had sealed their victory. Told you, he muttered under his breath. They never last long when they act up. Olivia stood beside him like a shadow, lips pressed together. Noah Reed moved in again, this time with a more deliberate pace. But before he could reach Jalen, a wave of voices rose from the cabin. He hasn't done anything wrong. Why are you lying to us? Play the video. It was Michael Chen who stood first, holding up his phone like a torch in a protest. I've recorded everything, he said. This man said nothing, did nothing. All he did was sit in his seat, quietly, with his daughter. Sophia rose right behind him, her voice firm. She just broadcast a lie across the plane. A younger couple behind them followed. Then an older woman with a cane. One by one, row by row, passengers rose, not to shout, but to block, to form a barrier, to stand between Jalen and the crew. Emily's face went pale. This is a security breach, she snapped. All of you, return to your seats. But no one moved. They were done sitting. Olivia's voice cracked. We're trained to de-escalate, not this. But her words were swallowed by the silence of authority collapsing. Maya turned to her father and whispered, They're protecting us? Jalen's voice was low, firm. They're protecting the truth. Then Ava Kim stepped forward, not hesitantly this time, but with both feet planted. I have audio, she said, loud enough for the cabin to hear. I recorded what Emily and Olivia said about his appearance, about moving him because of how he looked. Emily snapped. That's illegal. You can't record. Ava looked her square in the eyes. You're about to find out what's illegal. She held up her small device, thumb hovering over the playback button. But she didn't press it. She didn't have to. Because Sophia shouted. "We've posted it already. It's online," Michael added. "Hundreds of thousands of views, right now." Lucas's confidence faltered. "This is out of control," he muttered, retreating slightly. "We'll get blamed." Olivia's voice trembled. "They're right. We ignored complaints before." Emily turned to her. "What are you doing?" Olivia looked at Maya, then back at Emily. "Maybe what we should have done earlier?" Meanwhile, Jalen tapped his phone. "Nora," he said quietly. "Update Elena. Internal action pending." On the other end, Nora's reply was clear. "Understood. Corporate support confirmed." Passengers began clapping softly, not for entertainment, but in solidarity, in resistance. Sophia raised her phone once more and said into it, "We will not let this slide. Not in silence." Noah stood frozen, unsure whether to proceed or retreat. Jalen looked him in the eye. "You move me now, and you'll be in front of a judge by morning." Michael stepped beside him. "You lay a hand on him. We testify. Every one of us." For a second, it looked like Noah might push forward anyway. But he didn't. He stepped back, and in that space, Jalen stood. He didn't shout. He didn't gloat. He simply rose to his feet with his daughter beside him and faced the people who tried to strip him down. "I've stayed silent because I believed reason would prevail," he said, his voice low but clear. "But you've crossed the line. You've forged logs. You've lied on public record. You've humiliated my daughter. And you've tried to turn this entire plane into your courtroom, jury, and executioner." Emily didn't speak. Lucas swallowed hard. Olivia looked away. "You think I'm just some guy in a hoodie," Jalen continued. "But I'm not just a passenger. I'm not just a father. I'm not even just a CEO. I'm the man who signs your paychecks." The cabin gasped. Olivia's knees buckled slightly. Lucas took a full step back. Emily's face drained of color. "I own SkyPulse Airlines," Jalen said, slowly, for everyone to hear. "And in the next few minutes, there will be consequences," Sophia whispered. "That's why he was so calm." Maya stared up at her father, tears welling, not from fear, but from pride. "You didn't tell them?" she asked. Jalen smiled softly. "They never asked." Then Ava said it out loud. "I knew it. I knew something didn't add up. I'm with him." Emily stumbled. "You're bluffing." "Call your manager." Jalen replied calmly. "Call Elena Ruiz. She'll confirm it. Or check the internal system Nora just activated," Olivia muttered. "Oh my God." Lucas was silent. Noah looked around the cabin, dozens of eyes watching, filming, judging, and backed away completely. Jalen continued, his voice like a knife wrapped in silk. "You've insulted the passengers. You've violated company ethics. You've jeopardized lives over your own bias. But that ends today. Right here. Right now." "You're done," Sophia whispered into her phone, now streaming live. "He's firing them. On the plane," Michael added. "I've never seen anything like this." Jalen turned to Maya. "You okay?" She nodded, voice shaking. "I'm proud of you." Jalen's hand gently squeezed hers. "That's all I ever needed to hear." Then he looked back at Emily, Lucas, Olivia, and Noah. "You'll be removed from this crew, from this company, effective immediately. I have the authority, and I have the proof." Passengers clapped, some standing, some crying, some simply watching with disbelief. A story had just turned into a revolution at 3,000 feet, except they hadn't even taken off yet. Ava stepped forward. "And if there's anything I can do, anything, to help rebuild what they tried to destroy, I will." Jalen looked at her. You already did. Silence fell again, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was the stillness that follows a storm, the kind that tells you everything has changed. Jalen Carter stood tall in the aisle, still and composed, his daughter Maya beside him, eyes wide but unshaken. Emily Ward's mouth opened slightly, then closed again, as though her body refused to follow through with the lies it had so easily told minutes ago. Noah Reed stepped forward once more, now fully blocking Jalen's way, hand hovering near his belt. "Sir, I'm giving you one final chance to comply," he growled. "You're causing a disruption, and if you don't move now—" But the sentence was never finished, because Sophia Lee stood up again, this time walking into the aisle and planting herself directly between Noah and Jalen. "He's not going anywhere," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was ironclad. "And if you touch him, you'll have to go through all of us." Michael Chen joined her, placing himself beside Maya protectively. "He has every right to be here. You're the ones out of line." A teenager across the aisle stood up too, phone raised high. Recording. "We saw everything," she said. "This isn't going away. It's already gone viral." Emily stepped back, stunned by the wall forming in front of her. Row after row of passengers, rising without coordination, but in perfect unity. The cabin wasn't a cabin anymore. It had become a court, a protest, a reckoning. Ava Kim stepped closer to Jalen, barely able to contain her racing heart. "Sir, I've sent my audio to Nora," she whispered. "It has everything, from the first remark to the forged log." Jalen nodded once. "You did good." Then, turning to the crew, his voice lowered just enough to slice through the rising noise. "You still think this is about policy?" Emily tried to recover her grip on the situation. "You're making a scene," she snapped. "You think you can intimidate us because you say you're the CEO?" Lucas finally spoke again, though his voice lacked its earlier arrogance. "We don't answer to you," he muttered. "Actually," Jalen said, his words calm and heavy. "You do. Every email you've ever received in this company ends with my name. You want confirmation? Call HQ, or better yet." He pulled out his phone and dialed. "Nora, put me through to Elena." On the other end, his assistant didn't hesitate. "She's on standby." One ring, two, then a crisp voice came through the speaker. "Elena Ruiz speaking." Jalen didn't wait. "Elena, this is Jalen. I'm on board SP-202. We have a situation. Confirm my authority to terminate staff mid-flight if misconduct is verified by evidence and witness consensus." There was no pause. "Confirmed," Elena replied. "You may proceed. Internal compliance will back all actions." Then her voice sharpened. "We've seen the footage. Media has it too. Your decision will be supported." Emily stepped back, hand to her mouth. Olivia looked like she was going to be sick. Lucas scanned the faces rising around him and saw no sympathy. Noah stayed still, unsure whether to play security or surrender. Jalen spoke again. "Effective immediately. Emily Ward, Lucas Grant, Olivia Bennett, and Noah Reed. You are relieved of all duties aboard this flight. You will not be reboarding Skypulse aircraft in any role." Sophia gasped. Michael clapped. Someone in the back let out a single. Stunned. "Oh my God," Emily stammered. "You can't." But Jalen cut her off. "I just did. Nora has it logged. Elena has confirmed it. And the public? The public's watching in real time." Behind him, Maya's hand slid into his. She wasn't trembling anymore. She was standing beside the storm and smiling. Olivia broke first. "I didn't want this," she whispered, looking at Ava. "I just followed their lead." Ava didn't reply. Lucas said nothing, his hands clenched at his sides. Noah, finally unarmed by the tide of resistance, took a step back and nodded once, silently accepting his fate. Emily, red-faced, turned toward the exit. "You've destroyed our careers," she spat. "You destroyed yourselves." Jalen replied, "I just removed the illusion that protected you." Just then, Nora's voice came through again on speaker. "Public apology draft is ready. Elena says press has been briefed. Compensation offers to affected passengers are in place." Michael couldn't help but laugh under his breath. "This is real justice," he said. "It's happening in real time." Jalen looked around the cabin, not just at the passengers who stood up, but those who couldn't speak, those still sitting with their phones raised, those who came on board expecting a quiet flight and were now watching something historic unfold in front of them. The Thompsons, the white couple in 2A and 2B, who had sipped champagne while all this unfolded, finally spoke. "We're sorry," the woman said quietly. "We didn't understand what was happening." Jalen nodded but didn't speak. It wasn't about their understanding. It was about accountability. He turned to Maya. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "This is what standing up looks like?" "Sometimes it's messy," he said. "But yes, this is what it means to own your voice." Ava took a step closer. "Sir, I know I'm new, but I'd like to help clean up this mess. If you'll let me—" Jalen looked at her. "You already have." He paused. "You're promoted, effective immediately." Her eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "Very," Jalen said. "We need people like you in leadership, not just uniforms." Someone in the back began clapping, and within seconds, it spread. Not applause for entertainment, applause for courage, applause for truth, applause for a man who didn't raise his voice, but raised the standard. The fired crew members stood awkwardly near the front, stripped of authority, stunned by the reversal. Security would escort them off upon landing. Jalen didn't have to say it. Everyone knew. Olivia finally turned to Maya. "I'm sorry," she said, eyes glistening. "I should have spoken up sooner." Maya looked at her, then at her father, and said softly, "Then start now." Jalen didn't look back again. He took his seat, still recording, as Sophia sat beside him, filming her final update. "Passengers took a stand today," she said into her phone. "A crew was fired for bias, and the CEO, yes, the CEO, was the one targeted, but he didn't shout, he didn't threaten. He showed them who he was, with truth." Her eyes scanned the cabin. "Skypulse has a long way to go, but maybe this is the start of something better." Maya leaned her head on her father's shoulder, and for the first time since the flight began, she smiled. "You were right, Dad," she said. "Truth wins." Jalen looked down at her. "It always does," he replied. The aircraft, finally cleared, began to taxi, but in many ways, it had already taken off. The plane hadn't even reached cruising altitude, but the entire cabin was already airborne, emotionally, socially, morally. The fired crew lingered near the galley, no longer speaking, no longer in control. Their uniforms were intact, but their authority had been stripped like old paint in a storm. Passengers had returned to their seats, but not their silence. Phones still recorded, eyes still watched. Conversations buzzed, low and electric, like the hum before a verdict. Then came the moment that none of them, crew or passenger, would ever forget. Sophia turned in her seat and asked, voice steady, "Mr. Carter, do you want to tell them who you really are?" The cabin quieted again. Jalen looked around, at the phones pointed at him, at the flight attendants reduced to shadows, at Maya's trusting face beside him, and stood once more. "My name," he said, slowly, clearly, is Jalen Carter. I am the founder, CEO, and sole owner of SkyPulse Airlines. A collective gasp rose from the seats like wind rushing through a canyon. Emily's legs buckled. Lucas gripped the sidewall. Olivia closed her eyes. I built this company from the ground up, Jalen continued. Not for luxury, but for dignity. For travelers who look like me, for kids who look like my daughter. And today, I was humiliated on my own plane, in my own seat, in front of my own child. Maya stared up at him, her face glowing with something deeper than pride. He's telling the truth, Sophia confirmed, facing the cabin. We looked him up. Videos of him at fundraisers, interviews. His foundation has put over 200 underprivileged students through school, Michael added. He's not just the CEO, he's a force for good. And they tried to throw him in the back of the plane. Jalen's voice dropped an octave, heavy with restrained power. Let me be clear, he said. Effective immediately, I am initiating termination procedures for 4 individuals, Emily Ward, Lucas Grant, Olivia Bennett, and Noah Reed. Not out of anger, but out of necessity. Because what happened here today is not rare. It's not isolated. It's systemic, and I will not allow it to exist under my leadership. He turned slightly, glancing toward the galley. Ava Kim will be promoted to lead flight service training, and she will help rebuild what bias tried to burn down. Ava's hand went to her mouth, stunned. Thank you, she whispered. I'll do everything I can. I know you will, Jalen replied. Then he looked out over the cabin again. This isn't just about me. It's about every person who's ever been doubted for their skin, their clothes, their accent, their name. I came on this flight as a father. I now leave this moment as a man done tolerating quiet injustice. The cabin, already brimming, broke into spontaneous applause, some standing again, some crying softly, all moved by what they had just witnessed. But before he could sit down, Olivia stepped forward, trembling. Wait, she said, her voice cracking. There's something I need to say. The cabin went still again. Emily's eyes narrowed. Olivia, don't. But Olivia didn't stop. You want the truth? Here it is. Emily told us before boarding that we'd probably have to clean up the seating because they always sneak into first class. She didn't mean a standby mix-up. She meant black passengers. And Lucas? He backed it. Every time. Lucas blanched. That's not true. Yes, it is, Olivia shouted, cutting him off. We've ignored profiling complaints. We've joked about attire. We've forged logs to cover our backs. And we were warned. We were warned by Ava, and we did nothing. I did nothing. She turned to Jalen, tears in her eyes. I was part of it. I didn't speak up. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Jalen stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. Thank you for saying it, but truth doesn't erase harm. It just begins repair. Olivia nodded slowly. I understand. I just needed to stop hiding. Emily, cornered and pale, turned toward the cockpit. You'll hear from my union, she muttered. But the threat fell flat. The entire cabin had heard her before. The recordings had captured her words. The logs had been forged. The truth had gone viral. Nothing she said now could undo that. Lucas slumped into a jump seat, finally speechless. Noah had disappeared into the shadows, knowing any move now would be captured, documented, used. Sophia leaned across the aisle and whispered, This is going to hit the news in hours, Michael added. No, minutes. It's probably already trending. And he was right. On the other end of the plane's weak Wi-Fi, notifications were pouring in. Screens lit up. SkyPulse CEO targeted on own flight. Passengers block removal of Black Airline executive. Crew fired mid-air after viral racism scandal. Jalen sat back down, finally, and gently rubbed Maya's shoulder. She looked up at him, tearful. "You didn't yell," she said. "You didn't fight." "I stood," Jalen replied. "Sometimes, standing is louder than shouting." Maya leaned against him, and for the first time since boarding, closed her eyes. She felt safe. Nora's voice came in through his earbuds a moment later. "Termination paperwork filed. Public apology sent to press. We've initiated passenger compensation protocols. Elena says the board is unanimous. They back you 100%. Jalen nodded slightly. "Good. Let's make sure they also back reform." "Already in motion," Nora said. "We're leaking it internally. Reporters will have it before wheels down." Jalen looked around once more. The cabin was quiet. Yes, but not dead. It was awake. Passengers weren't just witnesses now. They were participants in something bigger. A shift. A start. A symbol. He stood one final time, not to speak, but to turn and face the back of the plane. And in that moment, Maya picked up her phone and began typing a message. Not for social media, not for the world, for her father. "Dad, you showed me what justice looks like. You didn't just fight for yourself. You fought for everyone like me. I'll never forget this." She tucked the draft into her notes app and hit save. For later. For always. Around them. The cabin prepared for descent. But inside, something else was rising. The fasten seatbelt sign had just turned off, but no one moved. There was no chatter about drinks, no clinking of glasses, just a long, held breath shared by everyone inside the first-class cabin of Skypulse Flight SP-202. Jalen Carter stood again, not because he needed to prove anything, but because leadership demanded it. He stepped to the front of the cabin, near the galley where the 4 dismissed crew members sat in a kind of stunned silence. Emily Ward, rigid and bitter. Lucas Grant chewing the inside of his cheek. Olivia Bennett pale and quiet. And Noah Reed slumped like a man already fading from relevance. Jalen didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The weight of his authority now filled every corner of the cabin, undeniable and unshakable. "This is a formal personnel meeting," he began. "Per Sky Pulse protocol, I, as CEO and sole owner, have the authority to terminate staff during active duty under grounds of ethical misconduct when supported by evidence and eyewitness corroboration." The passengers, many of them still holding phones, listened with breathless intensity. Emily Ward, Lucas Grant, Olivia Bennett, and Noah Reed, you are hereby terminated, effective immediately. Your conduct today violates every standard of professionalism, integrity, and decency that this airline claims to uphold. Emily opened her mouth to object, but nothing came out. Jalen continued. "You will be escorted upon landing, barred from re-employment within the company or any of its subsidiaries, and reported to internal compliance and external regulatory agencies." Lucas leaned forward suddenly, his voice dry and cracking. "I forged the log," he admitted. "The seat record. I faked it so it looked like he wasn't supposed to be in 1A. Murmurs rippled through the cabin again. He exhaled slowly. "And it's not the first time. We've done it before. Twice. Maybe 3 times in the past month. Usually just enough to justify moving people who didn't look right." Sophia gasped. Ava looked like someone had punched the wind out of her. Olivia dropped her head into her hands. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. Lucas looked at her, then back at Jalen. "Because no one ever questions us. And when someone does, we write it off. Today just happened to go viral." Emily stared at him in disbelief. "You idiot," she hissed. "You just confessed." "No," Jalen said calmly. "He just gave us truth. Something we've needed for a long time." Then he turned to the passengers. "Let this be clear. Skypulse Airlines will no longer tolerate hidden bias, quiet prejudice, or systemic cover-ups. Every log Lucas altered will be investigated. Every past complaint ignored will be reopened. Today is not just a firing. It is the start of reform. Nora's voice came in through Jalen's earpiece. Media outlets are publishing the apology now. Elena confirms compensation emails have been sent to all affected passengers. And we've received over 1 million views across the original clips. Jalen gave a soft nod. Good. Let the truth speak louder than excuses. Then he turned to Ava. Ms. Kim, he said formally. Your courage under pressure has exemplified the kind of integrity this airline needs. Effective immediately. You are promoted to Senior Flight Services Coordinator, with full training oversight and escalation rights. Ava's mouth fell open. I'm still in training. And you've just trained this entire flight on how to do the right thing under pressure, Jalen said, gently but firmly. We need people who listen to their conscience, not just policy. Passengers applauded, not a wave of polite claps. Real, raw approval, Sophia called out. This is how change happens, Michael added. It shouldn't have taken this much, but thank God it happened now. Jalen let the applause die naturally. Then, returning to his seat, he looked at Maya, who hadn't taken her eyes off him once. I didn't want you to see this side of the world, he said, but I'm glad you saw how we respond to it. Maya leaned in. I'll never forget it. At the front of the plane, the dismissed crew were now being quietly separated by ground instructions relayed to the captain. They would be met upon landing by internal affairs. Nothing dramatic, but formal, serious, consequential, just as they deserved. Elena Ruiz's voice chimed in briefly through Nora's connection. Jalen, you've sparked something. The board is holding a meeting tonight. We'll begin rewriting internal equity protocols immediately. And make sure Ava's part of that, Jalen said. She doesn't just deserve a promotion. She deserves a seat at the table. Already done, Elena replied. Also, we're being contacted by 2 national outlets. They want your official statement. Jalen paused. Give them the video. No script, no edit, just the truth. From the aisle. From today. Nora's voice came back. Copy that. Jalen leaned back slightly, the weight of the day slowly settling on his shoulders. But beside him, Maya rested her head on his arm, her eyes peaceful for the first time since takeoff. The cabin lights dimmed slightly, somewhere near the back. A baby cooed, and for just a moment, the plane felt like what it was supposed to be all along, a place of movement, of calm, of destination. But this time, not just in miles, in meaning. Something had shifted mid-air, and it wasn't just policy. It was culture. 3 months had passed since Flight SP-202 touched down, but the impact hadn't faded. It had only grown. The 4 dismissed crew members, Emily, Lucas, Olivia, and Noah, were now the subject of internal SkyPulse compliance reports and external industry probes. Though none had faced criminal charges, their names had been quietly added to a no-rehire list that circulated across major airline HR systems. A quiet industry verdict. Emily had gone silent publicly, but reportedly filed a wrongful termination claim that was quickly dropped after video evidence resurfaced. Lucas vanished from social media entirely after his forged logs were cited as examples in a national training overhaul. Olivia, though remorseful, chose not to appeal. She had sent Maya a handwritten note weeks later, just a few short lines. Thank you for standing with your father. You changed me. I'm sorry I didn't do more. Noah returned to private security work, reportedly turning down 2 interviews to let it fade. But the story didn't fade. Not online, not within SkyPulse, and certainly not in the hearts of the passengers who had been there. Jalen Carter's quiet strength on that flight became the catalyst for one of the most sweeping reforms in airline conduct policy in over a decade. SkyPulse launched an internal equity task force, led by Elena Ruiz and co-chaired by Ava Kim, tasked with reviewing every complaint from the past 5 years, revising appearance-based risk assessments, and overhauling training protocols for cabin crew nationwide. Jalen had refused press tours, opting instead for something stronger: transparency. He approved the public release of the full in-flight footage, unedited, uncut, and painfully honest. Media outlets praised the move. Civil rights leaders cited it as a landmark case. But for Jalen, it wasn't about press or pride. It was about something far deeper. It was about his daughter. The story didn't end with firings. It became something more, something that lived and breathed in classrooms, boardrooms, and training manuals. Jalen quietly expanded his charity fund to cover 300 students instead of 200, many of them in regions where aviation and hospitality schools had never offered scholarships. When asked why, he simply replied, "Because we don't just fly people, we lift them." The passengers from that day stayed loosely connected. Sophia sent flowers to Maya on her birthday. Michael emailed Ava a job referral, and several wrote testimonials published anonymously on the SkyPulse site, describing how their view of leadership had changed, not because Jalen shouted, but because he stood. Then came the final twist: an email forwarded anonymously to Elena Ruiz. It was a scanned memo dated months before the flight. From a mid-level regional manager overseeing crew assignments: maintain vigilance on all first-class boardings. Be especially alert to appearance irregularities. No hoodie, no jeans policy should be encouraged, even if not official. The language was subtle but unmistakable. It revealed a quiet institutional bias, a push from behind the scenes that made what happened to Jalen not just personal, but systemic. Elena brought it to Jalen with trembling hands. "This memo," she said, "shows the rot ran deeper than the crew." Jalen stared at it for a long moment. "Then we don't just fix the surface," he replied. "We cut it out by the root." The manager resigned within the week. His departure was quiet, but the silence spoke volumes. SkyPulse publicly acknowledged the memo's existence and apologized again. This time not just to Jalen, but to every passenger whose dignity was ever second-guessed because of how they looked. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was honest. And it was enough. Then, one clear morning, Jalen opened his inbox to find a message from Maya. Not a text, not a voice note, but a scanned letter she'd handwritten and left in his briefcase. He read it slowly, the way one reads something that matters. "Dad, you showed me what it means to lead, not with anger, but with truth. You taught me that silence isn't strength and dignity doesn't have to yell. I watched you stand when others would have sat down. And when the world tried to push you out of your seat, you showed them it was your plane. I'm proud to be your daughter. You gave me more than a trip to Maui. You gave me a story I'll carry for life." Jalen didn't cry, but he did sit very still for a long time, letter in hand, heart full. He thought about how close he had come to letting it slide, to moving to economy just to keep things easy. But then Maya wouldn't have seen the cost of silence. She wouldn't have seen the value of rising in the months that followed. She told the story at her school's student assembly. She wrote about it in her college essays. And one day, she shared it with a young girl who had been called too loud for standing up to a teacher's unfairness. "You're not too loud," Maya told her. "You're just starting your own flight." And so it lived on. Not just in reports and policies and apologies, but in hearts, in voices, in daughters, in every seat that was once denied, now rightfully reclaimed, justice. Jalen knew. Didn't arrive with noise. It arrived with the quiet resolve to never move when you know you're already home.